Sometimes, sadness doesn't look like tears. Sometimes it looks like silence. A sudden quiet in the group chat, unanswered calls, a presence that fades without warning. And the people who vanish when they're hurting, they're not always cold or distant. They're often the ones who care too deeply. They disappear not to punish anyone, but to protect everyone, including themselves. Their sadness isn't loud enough to demand attention. It's quiet, private, almost sacred. They believe that disappearing is safer than being seen when they're breaking. But behind that choice lies something deeper, a pattern of emotional survival, a learned behavior shaped by experience, trust, and fear. Today, we're stepping into that quiet space to understand the psychology of people who disappear when they're sad. Disappearing during sadness isn't just avoidance. It's communication without words. It says, I don't know how to be around people right now, or I don't want to burden anyone. Psychologists sometimes describe this as withdrawal-based coping, when emotional pain turns inward instead of outward. While some people seek comfort and connection, others seek control through solitude. For these individuals, sadness can feel unpredictable, like a wave that's easier to ride alone. They don't want to be seen at their most vulnerable. They fear that others won't understand, or worse, will misunderstand, offering shallow comfort when what they crave is deep understanding. Often, disappearing feels like the only way to stay safe, because in their minds, being alone means being in control, and control is what pain often takes away first. This pattern might look mysterious or even cold to outsiders, but it's actually a defense, one built from stories of disappointment, overstimulation, or a history of not being emotionally met when it mattered most. There are two main psychological roots behind this disappearing act: emotional self-preservation and attachment conditioning. Let's start with self-preservation. People who disappear when sad often have a deeply ingrained instinct to retreat inward when emotions overwhelm them. It's like an internal alarm. Don't fall apart in front of anyone. This instinct can form early. Maybe they grew up in an environment where emotions were seen as weakness, where crying was met with dismissal, or where sadness had no safe witness. Over time, they learned to process pain privately, not because they wanted to, but because that was the only way to stay emotionally intact. Even in adulthood, that pattern lingers. When sadness hits, their body remembers a rule: retreat, regroup, return when stable. So they disappear, not to hide forever, but to repair quietly. Psychologists call this emotional regulation through solitude, the idea that being alone can help someone calm their nervous system and think clearly again. It's not inherently unhealthy. Solitude can be healing, but when it becomes the only way to cope, it can slowly turn into emotional isolation. Then there's attachment conditioning, the subtle emotional blueprint we carry from childhood into relationships. People with avoidant attachment styles, for example, often retreat when they feel emotional discomfort. They learned early that closeness can feel suffocating or unpredictable, so they associate distance with safety. When sadness appears, connection feels threatening, not comforting. So they pull away, subconsciously protecting themselves from rejection or misunderstanding. Imagine someone who grew up hearing, "You're too sensitive," or "Get over it." When that person feels sad as an adult, part of them still expects the same invalidation. So before anyone can dismiss their feelings, they disappear first. It's not that they don't want to be understood. They just don't believe they will be. And so, they disappear before disappointment has a chance to find them. But ironically, this self-protection can deepen their loneliness, because while disappearing may shield them from pain, it also hides them from the possibility of care. When people vanish in sadness, it's rarely about rejection. It's about protection from emotional overload, from the wrong kind of comfort, from reliving old wounds. They're not trying to push the world away. They're trying to find the strength to face it again. But understanding the why is only the beginning. Next, we'll look at what happens inside that silence, how isolation changes the way the mind heals, why some people return stronger while others drift further away, and how connection can be rebuilt without crossing emotional boundaries. Because sometimes the ones who disappear aren't trying to be alone forever. They're just learning how to come back whole. Silence isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's a language of its own, one that speaks through absence. When someone disappears during sadness, they're not only escaping others, they're escaping the version of themselves they can't stand to face. That heaviness inside them, the confusion, the dull ache of not knowing why they feel so much. It can make their own reflection unbearable. Psychologists call this emotional dysregulation through shame, the belief that sadness itself is something to hide. To them, withdrawing feels cleaner than falling apart where someone might see. They equate emotional exposure with loss of dignity. But there's another layer to this silence, one that's rarely noticed. For some, disappearing isn't about sadness at all. It's about maintaining emotional control in a world that once felt uncontrollable. Maybe they've been through chaos before, homes filled with arguments, unstable relationships, sudden losses. In those spaces, disappearing became a strategy. They learn that silence is the one thing no one can take away from them. Then there are those who vanish as a form of self-repair. They isolate not to avoid emotion, but to study it quietly, privately, like a scientist observing a wound. They journal, replay conversations in their minds, retrace steps to understand what went wrong. These people don't run from sadness. They metabolize it slowly, until it becomes something they can hold without breaking. And sometimes their disappearance is temporary peace, an emotional timeout before the noise of life resumes. But to others, it can feel like rejection, the friend who stops replying, the partner who suddenly becomes distant. It's easy to mistake that quiet for indifference. Yet beneath the silence, there's a hidden truth. Most people who disappear don't want to be forgotten. They just hope someone will understand their absence without forcing them to explain it. There's a strange kind of beauty in people who retreat to heal. They remind us that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "I need time." But this kind of solitude walks a fine line. Too little, and the noise of the world overwhelms you. Too much, and you start to forget how to return. Many of these people struggle with re-entry, with showing up again after they've disappeared. They worry that too much time has passed, that the silence they needed will be mistaken for distance, that others have already moved on. And so, they linger in that quiet, not because they want to stay, but because they no longer know how to come back. This is where healing becomes complicated, because disappearing might protect you from being hurt again, but it also protects you from being loved again. The walls built for safety can turn into glass prisons. You can see the world, but you don't feel part of it. You can watch people laugh, text, connect, but something inside you hesitates. It whispers, "What if I open up and it happens again?" Yet, there's something sacred in that hesitation too. It shows care, a deep awareness of what your heart can and cannot handle. And with time, that awareness can evolve into wisdom. You begin to realize that disappearing doesn't have to mean isolation. It can mean pausing. It can mean honoring your process. And eventually, it can mean returning with more clarity, more strength, and more truth than before. If you're someone who disappears when you're sad, this isn't your flaw. It's your nervous system doing its best to protect you in the only way it knows how. But maybe the next time you feel the urge to vanish, you could try leaving a small light on before you go, a message, a gesture, a signal that says, "I'm not gone. I'm just taking a moment to breathe." Because connection doesn't always mean closeness. Sometimes it's simply letting others know you're still here, even from a distance. And if someone you care about disappears when they're hurting, don't chase them. Don't guilt them. Don't demand an explanation. Just make sure that when they come back, they find a space that still feels safe. Everyone heals differently. Some in conversation, some in solitude. But all of us, in one way or another, are searching for the same thing. A place where our sadness doesn't have to disappear for us to belong. So, which one are you? The one who disappears, or the one who waits? If this helped you understand yourself or someone else, consider subscribing, not just to this channel, but to compassion itself. Because the quiet ones aren't always gone. Sometimes, they're just finding their way home.